Hey, welcome back, beautiful souls. We are going to talk about power today. Yeah, we're going to talk about authenticity and personal power and living a life that is aligned with your truth. So, power is so deeply rooted in each one of us, but I think that it's often misunderstood. And it's one of those words that can be defined in so many ways. And it might already, just the word, be bringing up different emotions in you because power has often obviously been abusive and oppressive in our history. And what we're going to talk about today is our personal power. And that's not to shy away from the hard discussion of power beyond us and the systems of power, because I think that everything is related. A system of power is developed over time by the people in the system. And yeah, at some point it is a collective greater than the one, but also I do believe that we have a role to play in that collective as much as the collective influences our life. And I think that's probably another separate conversation, but I think that power and the practice of power has to start somewhere. So we might as well start with us. Most of us aren't in charge of like a nation or, a big system. And maybe we're in charge, though, of a team every day, or in charge of learners, or in charge of one other person. Maybe it's our own home. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing else outside of us except us. Just because we're not in charge or we don't have influence over as many people or animals or structures or things than another person, I don't think negates the importance of really diving into what power is and what personal power is and how that looks. And one of my teachers has this phrase that I love, and it's talking about power to the people, but it's also talking about that you can't give power to the people if the people don't stand in their power. And it's like, have you ever seen the people who win the lottery, or like athletes or anybody who comes into a lot of money? Let's just use money, for example, instead of power, so you have something else to think about for a second. But these lottery winners will get incredible amounts of money, and they know nothing about money. They've never practiced like financial literacy or healthy financial habits. And actually, a lot of those people become broke because all they're given is money. It's not like they're given anything along with that money to know how to use it. And the money just becomes a magnifier. And it's the same with power. The power just becomes a magnifier of what's already there. Like the money can't be used by itself. Someone has to use the money. The same with power. Power can't be used by itself. It has to be exercised by somebody. So if we think that we're going to like change the power structures outside of us without first really stepping into and living our personal power, then in my humble opinion, we often end up propagating the misuse and misunderstanding of power. So that's where I just want to focus this conversation on personal power, because that applies to everybody. And then as you create and interact with powers external to you, then you would have practiced a healthy, loving relationship with your own personal power that then you can extend to your relationship with powers outside of you. So if that sounds good to you, keep listening. If not, and I've already pissed you off and offended you, I love you so much. And please tell me what you're seeing that I can't see, because I truly believe that we all have our biases. So this is mine. I'm going to share it with you. And this is not to like teach you or tell you anything. This is just my take on personal power and how to do that from a really loving, self-empowered place, and then use that to continue to grow and navigate the world. Okay, so let's just start off like how we sometimes do with like, what is power? What is this thing we're talking about? So power historically just refers to your ability to influence, control, or direct people, resources, or events to achieve a specific outcome. That's what the dictionary says. So basically, like, you can make shit happen, whether it's physically, intellectually, or socially. But remember that in this space, we always start with the self, and we start with our most loving, compassionate, free, authentic self. And from there, we create. So we're going to take all of that and put it to the side because, again, all of these are like human constructs that we're playing with. And so we're just going to create a little bit of space for us to play. So let's bring it to the person now. So we're talking about influencing other people's life. Let's talk about influencing our life. How do you influence your own life? There's infinite ways you could answer that. Maybe some of those ways are having the inner strength to set boundaries. Maybe it's navigating life in a way that aligns with your values and your identity. And maybe it's creating change from the inside out. As you're working on creating change from the outside in, of course, I can't negate the outside world. And I don't want you to feel like this space is just like unicorns and rainbows and we're just ignoring everything out there that's real, because that's not. We're just trying to first understand, embrace, play, and create and embody something that feels right and authentic and free and good. And then from there, grow. Okay. So I don't think that being powerful has anything to do with being bossy or loud or controlling or being seen. And that's so often like what you think about when you think of a powerful person. And when you think of external authority, is someone who is, like, if you go back to that definition that we started with in the dictionary, it is someone who is exerting control over others, or in a system where there's hierarchy that impacts your circumstances. So when we talk about personal power, we're talking about the internal capacity to, create change in your life through your beliefs, your mindset, your action. And that's something that no one can take away from you, even if you are the lowest one, let's say, on like the totem pole. I know we've mentioned Viktor Frankl before, and that's an example of somebody that I think about when I am struggling with like feeling like a victim, for example. And I know that many of you know who he is, but he, just to remind us, was a Holocaust survivor. And I can't imagine, like, talk about someone exerting inhumanity and exerting like their power over you. Like, I can't imagine that he was in one of the most inhumane, powerless situations imaginable. And yet he chose to see and recognize that he had control over his mind and his thoughts and his attitude and his beliefs and him, his internal state of being, that no one could take away from him, that not even his situation could take away from him, that his internal power couldn't be taken away. And I, remember in the last decade or so, there was a man that was wrongly imprisoned. And I listened to an interview with him, and that's exactly the same thing that he said. Despite him being in this prison cell, he would allow his mind to dream and to be, and he would show up in that prison cell with to other inmates and to staff with kindness, and he allowed himself to have agency to what he could in that situation, which was, who did he want to decide he could be? And he decided that they couldn't take his mind away from him. They couldn't take his heart away from him. They couldn't take him away from him, even though they had taken literally everything. And it was one of the most profound interviews. And I think that, that's obviously an extreme situation. And please don't get me wrong. I am not saying that difficult, oppressive situations, abusive situations are okay. I'm not saying you shouldn't complain about it, that you shouldn't fight for what is right. Obviously, we all have a right, I believe, to dignity and to safety, and it's not okay to be in those situations. I'm just saying that there are examples like those extreme ones of personal power where people have maintained some degree of, agency and influence in their internal state. And that piece of it I find inspiring. And again, I'm not condoning the systems. I'm not condoning, the systems of hate and oppression and punishment. Like that's not what this space is about. This space is about love and healing and restoration of humanity. And what I'm saying is that part of restoring humanity is restoring ourselves. And the way to restore ourselves is to be in our personal power. Another way to think about what personal power is just simply that, is being aligned in your mind, body, and spirit. As a woman, I think about this ancient Greek term, parthernos, which is a woman whole onto herself. And that word is, or that idea is such a beautiful one and it obviously can extend to anybody. It's not just a woman, but it's a human being who has a sense of completeness that's not defined by others. And from that completeness, living a life that's on your own terms. And that's, I think, the most powerful place that you can be, being of a place of wholeness and living from that. And that sounds like super easy, but obviously it's not, because that takes a lot of courage to act in ways that honor your truth. And so many times we don't. We compromise our truth for somebody else's. We maybe make small bargains with ourselves to accommodate for somebody else. We tell ourselves little white lies so that it will be okay. And I think that is giving our power away. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of inner work and insight to be who you are and say what you really believe. Like, I'm imagining someone, let's say, who's afraid to have an honest conversation. Let's create a hierarchical situation where it's your boss. They obviously have external power over you, right? But let's keep coming back to personal power. So let's say you end up staying quiet. You don't want to speak your truth to this person because you're scared they're going to fire you, that you're going to be othered. And as a result, you feel powerless. But you're not feeling powerless because of your boss's external authority. They haven't even done anything. They're just being you. You're feeling powerless because you're giving away your internal power, your truth, by not aligning your actions with your beliefs. You're denying yourself the chance to stand in your truth. And I play it out because someone could say back to me, well, if you speak your truth, if let's say you have the courage to take aligned action and you do speak up, you're going to get fired. Let's just go there. Let's just say you get fired, to the most dramatic place, let's say, okay? Even if I got fired for speaking my truth, I'm still going to ask you, who's more powerful in that situation? Is it the person who fired me, or is it me who spoke my truth? I lived in full alignment of what I believe, and I didn't stay silent. I didn't barter with my beliefs. I didn't pretend to want to live this job. I was able to show up in my full authenticity of me. I don't think that power comes from this person holding something over me or exerting control over me or taking away a job from me. I think it's from, let's say, me telling them what I think. And even if I lost my job, what a beautiful opportunity to find a new job that is in total alignment with what I think and see and who I want to be. Then it's actually supportive that person released me from the misalignment. And it's not a bad thing at all. We judge it to be bad because we lost a job, but maybe it's not a bad thing at all. Maybe it is allowing space to be created for what is in alignment and to continue to be whole onto myself and living from that space. And I think when we stay silent, when we allow these little white lies and this little bargaining of our life, or we're pretending, we're making sacrifices for a life we're only pretending to want, that I think is powerlessness. That is giving our power away to things outside of us. It's not taking the power from us. We are giving it away. So just reorienting us to living from a place of our truth. And sometimes that's complex and we have conflicting truths. Like, I might want to go out with my friends, and that would leave my partner stuck with the kids, and they're already overwhelmed and need a break. And yeah, my truth is that I might really want to like connect with this person and learn from this event and have like an act of self-love and friendship from this. And I also want to be a partner who's considerate and thoughtful and takes care of somebody. And so there are two different truths I might have to reconcile. But the difference is if I say no to the event and like yes to helping with the kids, it's different if I'm doing it because I think that I'm going to be a bad partner if I don't help, that I'm going to make them upset if I don't help, that I am like a bad person if I don't help. That's giving my power away to these expectations and illusions. That also feels terrible and not living in my power. But if I say, no, I do want to go to this event and like, yeah, this sucks. I'm going to have to miss it. But I want to say yes to the part of me who wants to be thoughtful. I'm going to say this isn't about like you and your expectations of me being exerted on me. This is about me and my expectations of me, of who I want to be. I want to be someone who's loving. I want to be someone who's supportive. I want to be someone who's thoughtful. I'm saying yes to that. I'm in alignment with that. And that is from a place of aligned action. That is from a place of personal power. My partner can decide that I'm great or wonderful. It doesn't matter. And I'm not allowing or giving my power away to those expectations of someone outside of me. I'm like being in alignment with who I want to be. I know that's a small example, but I think it's real because that comes up all the time. And that's what I mean by practicing our power. It is making aligned decisions, no matter how hard it is, uncomfortable it is, or if we have to give up maybe something else that we want. If our bigger truth is intact and aligned. When we talk about power, if we go back again to the original example, it is about like controlling things external to us or having external validation. And I think that sometimes those also get pretty entangled. And I think there's one thing of like control, and then we'll talk about validation next. But, if we're talking about only controlling our circumstance, like that's what we talk about in this space and with consciousness and thought work, is that we're only responsible for our experience. Of course, we might want to influence somebody else's experience, but we can never control it. But what I think is so interesting is when you live in alignment with yourself and you're influencing yourself, it actually opens you up to influence the world around you in such a more magnetized way. Let me give you an example, because I always remember this when I was early on in my coach training. A relationship coach was saying, your result line ends up in someone else's circumstance line. And there is obviously this play between your experience and someone else's experience. So let me again set up a power structure. Like, let's say you're in a team and you're at the bottom, quote unquote, of power in that team. And you are the one who's like, again, I'm a physician. So let's just say it's a team of people and I'm the one who's like putting in orders and following the person who's leading it. I have to ultimately like do what they decide, even if I want to give input. If I believe that like I don't matter and I'm not important or my values aren't important, I'm just there to put in orders or whatever, then that's how I'm going to show up. I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to challenge what anyone has to say. I'm not going to contribute anything. And I am just going to, do what I think I'm there to do. And that's it. And all of that is going to end up in my teammates' circumstance line. Oh, well, Satie was quiet today. Satie ran off. Satie didn't contribute. Satie didn't speak up. And they're going to continue living in their thought model. But if I say no, you know what? This role assigned to me doesn't fully define my power. I still think that there are opportunities for me to be aligned in my personal power. And we're talking about making decisions and patience, like they might listen to me, they might not, but it's important for me to be somebody who critically thinks, and it's important for me to speak up. So yeah, I know that I'm just going to put the orders in and I'm going to ultimately like execute this other person's decision. But I'm going to bring up this paper and I'm going to bring up this example and I'm going to ask a question that is like a critically, challenging question. And ultimately, they might not change anything. It might still have played out the way it was going to play out, right? And let's say that happens. At least I know and I am acting in a way that's aligned to who I am, to being someone who challenges or to critically thinks or who speaks up or who advocates, right? And the fact that I'm in a less powerful position, a less influential position, hasn't stopped me from acting still in my personal power, right? No one can take that away from me. If I want to advocate, I'm going to advocate, no matter if I'm the quote unquote lowest one on the totem pole. But what I think is really interesting, so like that's a gift on to itself, right? Is let things be external to you and realize that no matter what happens, you have your personal power and agency. But where I think it gets really interesting is what we just talked about your results end up in their circumstance line. So let's play it out again on somebody else's side. It's possible that things could have been the same and everything plays out the same, but it's also possible that now, instead of Satie being quiet or just putting in orders, not speaking up, running away, now in their circumstance line, ooh, this interesting question was asked. Ooh, this recent paper was shared. Ooh, this piece of information was asked. All those new circumstances are opportunities for those other people to have different thoughts, which lead to different feelings, actions, and results. And more often than not, I find that when you are exerting your own personal influence on you in a way that aligns you, that strengthens you, that helps you show up to who you want to be, it so much more powerfully actually ends up influencing the people around you. So it might be that because I did all those things in alignment with who I am, that ends up in their circumstance and that actually might influence their decisions or thoughts, even though, quote unquote, there is an actual hierarchical differential there, that even the person with the least power externally by labels and titles might have the most influence, but only if they allow themselves to influence themselves. And of course, that's not always the goal, is to control or manipulate the external circumstance. I just find it ironic that once we let go of that, it's so much more like interesting and magnetized when you do live in your personal power. I was actually talking about this with someone the other day, and their purpose in life was to be someone who's like compassionate and understanding. And they were in an awkward situation where now it was the flip. They were a person of power. They were leading a team and they wanted their teammates to feel seen and to feel heard and to feel validated. But because they live in compassion and understanding of everybody, there was this person who was like perceived as, let's just say an enemy, but like an opponent to the group. And the leader wanted to give them some space and some compassion and some understanding. And because of the insecurity of like, ooh, if I side with this opponent, my people aren't going to see that I'm with them. And so this person like really shut themselves down. And what's ironic is like, when you stay in alignment of, no, I know that compassion can be found everywhere. And I'm going to like engage in that way. I'm going to have compassion. Then it starts opening you up to like, tell me more about why you think they're against us. Tell me more about what you think about that. And like, I'm going to actively listen and I'm going to create space and I'm going to create safety. And your end result is that you are staying in your compassion, but actually another strategic byproduct is that you're creating an environment of compassion around you, and you're increasing the likelihood that this people that you're leading might find compassion to this opponent, quote unquote. And so, maybe your initial goal is like, let me help them find commonality. And when you're trying to control and force them to find commonality, that can be really hard. But when you're just focused on you finding commonality with yourself, with the situation, with the people around you, it becomes an example. It creates an environment for that to be conducive, that people then can tap into. I hope that wasn't too confusing of a story. So I think that's one piece of it, is like, why am I trying to control this? What am I trying to control? And at the end of the day, we're really just trying to control us. And of course, again, what I said in the beginning, I understand. I'm not like, I live in the world. I get it. There's things outside of us that absolutely should change and that we want to change. And that is going to have its own role and relationship. But I think it's something similar. It's like, let's say you're trying to change a political system or a whole hospital system, a whole business, and you're not in the position of power to change that thing. So let's go back to self. How can I be in a position of personal power to engage in meaningful ways that then can engage with that person who is in that position of power, who can get that thing done? Does that make sense? So maybe I can't directly control or directly exert control over something, and that's okay. Totally fine. And how can I exert my personal aligned action to support decisions, communities, voices, influences that then ultimately influence that person or persons that do have that greater exertional power? And, obviously that's when collaboration and community are so important. But that's, I think, where I go back to the beginning phrase of, you can't give power to the people unless the people practice their power. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, there's all these different layers and fluidity of society and how we all influence each other. And yeah, we're obviously not all in the position where we are leading things or running things. And that's really frustrating when you're rubbing up against that and you want something to change so badly. It's okay. And it opens it. Like, what I want for you is to open up a whole area of inquiry and curiosity. Where am I powerful? Where am I in alignment? And how can I use that then to fuel action, to fuel advocacy, to fuel education, to fuel awareness, and all of those byproducts? Maybe they can then create change. Like, right? That's the goal. But even if they do create change, that's amazing. You've won one. But even if they don't create change, you are still, at least on an individual level, practicing the skills and the tools of honesty, of courage, of love, of compassion, of creativity, of creation, of whatever, to influence your own life. And in that way, even though maybe you've not achieved the greater goal, you're still achieving the everyday goal of living in alignment of who you are. Okay, the last thing I want to say on power is that sometimes we want power to validate us, because if somebody else puts us in a position of power, we see that, okay, cool, they trust us, so I can trust me. They think I'm useful, so I can think I'm useful. And I think value and power can be tangled. And so, again, coming from a place of like self-empowerment, self-valuation, when we recognize our own value, our strengths, our contribution, then it is so much easier for us to work and to be and act in our personal power. Like, for example, you can set boundaries. You can say no when you need to and show up with total confidence. And I think it's similar to what we were saying to before with control. The same thing happens with value. It's like, ironically, the more aligned you are with your truth and the more you see that about you, you're going to show up that way. And guess what? The more the outside world is going to start to notice it, because again, your results are going to go in their circumstance line. So if you see yourself as valuable and you're standing in your worth and you're going to show up in that way, and people probably are going to start to see you also as more valuable, and it's going to ripple outward. And it's naturally going to influence your external circumstance in ways that maybe you didn't intend. And so when you recognize your personal power and you're walking in that alignment, yeah, people are going to see that. They're going to sponsor you. They're going to give you opportunities. They're going to invite you into greater roles and greater authority. And it creates this like positive feedback loop that the more and more aligned you are with your truth, and you can make some of those hard decisions and take those hard actions that take courage, the more people are going to trust you that you're able to do that and bestow upon you that external power without you trying to manipulate the situation. So that's a lot to say in this episode, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can say. And again, this isn't to like negate the consequences of our action, but if it is from aligned action, I don't know, maybe it's not a bad thing that there are consequences. Who is the one judging it as bad except the eye of the beholder? So I just wish us all to remember that no one can take away our personal power unless we allow them to take it away. And that our aligned action is just determined by us. And it's not easy to unlearn these beliefs that power is about pleasing others or making them happy. And I think that these themes of power, we'll have to do a whole episode on creating safety to be in your power, because I think that is a huge foundation. You can't be in your power if you don't feel safe to be in your power. I think that totally needs to be unpacked of how do you feel safe in your body to be in your power? Because if it was easy and if it felt fine, if it didn't feel scary, we would all do it. But the truth is that it is scary and it does feel unsafe, and that we've all been in situations where not feeling safe has led us to give away our power to create safety, to mitigate the threat. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't get out of bad situations, toxic situations, abusive situations, but that is only half of the equation. Because if we don't do the work on the inside to figure out how do we create internal safety, how do we create courage, how do we process emotions, how do we have these hard conversations, then we can get out of a bad situation. But then we're going to constantly be spending our life just running from bad situations without the other half of it, of creating the internal safety, the internal peace that we need to take with us for every time we change our situation. So that's where it goes back and forth. It's hard to mention self-empowerment without mentioning outside structures. But I think that what often gets overlooked is when we talk about outside power and value and validation and all this stuff, we so often forget the other half of the equation, which is the internal. And of course, that's what this space is about. It's about our self-love, our self-empowerment, our self-safety, our self-sourcing in the greater picture of harmonizing the outside with the inside and the inside with the outside. So we'll do a whole nother episode on creating internal safety, because it is valid. It is true. You can't be in your power if you don't feel safe to be in your power. And like the opposite too, right? You can't shine if you don't feel safe to shine. You can't speak up if you don't feel safe to speak up. You can't be magical and wonderful if you don't feel safe to do and be in those things. So we'll end you with that true personal power is going to come from loving ourselves, from standing in our truth, from owning our authenticity. And I think this is like where a lot of coaching can help and other healing modalities can help, and holding space for ourselves and for these concepts, and to really invite ourselves to be in our authority. Again, I'm not here to like teach you what's right for your life. Again, I'm not here to teach you what's right for your life or what's right and wrong. I'm just here to expose you to ideas, and you expose me to ideas, and we can all continue to grow and learn from each other. And I wish you ultimately to decide what resonates with you and to continue to ebb and flow and change throughout time. And to remember that personal power is already within you. We just have to practice it. So in our ending tradition, I just want to end you with a couple of questions you can chew on. But where are you already practicing being in alignment, living in alignment? Can you see that as being in your truth, in your power? And where are you making little accommodations, little white lies, little bargainings, little settlings? Can you see that as giving away your power? And why are you doing that? What would happen if you were just radically honest with yourself? And again, you don't have to act on any of this. It can be terrifying just to do the activity. I know it is for me, and it has been for me in the past. No one has to know, but it is powerful just to see those truths and start to do little tiny actions and play in the shallow end where it's safe, to try to build that relationship with yourself, to be a woman onto herself or a person onto themselves, meaning having that sense of completeness, of wholeness, and living a life on your own terms. And that livingness is from action, but before the action, we have to come from the beingness. So that's okay. We can spend time there and just sit in there. We can sit in our beliefs and untangle them and do the healing work necessary to just start first in our beingness of us before we even have to tell anybody or make any decisions or do anything. There's no urgency to this. There's no rush to this. This is just for you to love yourself, to support yourself with curiosity, and hopefully with a little bit of like play in it and lightness in it and excitement and dreaming. And then you can decide. Just start with a little bit of space and start with honesty with ourselves. Whew. All right. I am wishing you all play, possibility, and peace, and your personal power. I'm wishing you to feel so supported and loved in this space. I am so honored to be a part of your soul tribe. I'm sending you love, and I'll see you next week.